Hey guys! In today's episode of Jwatcheshockey, we finally talk about some hockey. Um, so today's episode is about being an international hockey fan. I'm gonna cover sort of not the negatives because it's still really fun, but some of the frustrating things about being a fan outside of North America. Particularly as a UK fan, this is specific to me, but I'm sure a lot of it's quite transferable. So the most obvious downside of being an international fan is that every start is a late start. Like, afternoon games for me, in most parts of most games, afternoon games, still start at sort of like 7-8 o'clock in the evening, which it's not too bad. Like, it's after dinner and after everything, so it's easy to watch, but those are late starts. Those are what, like, all the beat reporters for the Hawks are complaining about as being a late start. Hogs games, home games, for all of playoffs, pretty much have started at like 8:30, like local time, which means at 3:30, I'm still waiting for games to start, which now in university, I only had one 9 a.m. start, which, wasn't too bad. But when I was still doing like 9 till 4 days, games wouldn't finish until 6 o'clock. Which is kind of hard to do when you're, when running on 1 hour sleep, you can sort of do once. But when there's a game every 3 days, you just can't do it. You end up having to miss games. And I mean, when the first game of the Boston series in 2013 went to triple overtime, that game was still going when I woke up to go to college, that's pretty impressive. I was on the bus on the way to college when the game finished. I would not have been happy if I just stayed up for that game and then the Hawks lost. But it was okay, because we won the series and a big shiny, so it's fine. It's all fine. And the other thing about late starts is it creates an even bigger sense of missing out on something, because not only do you miss the game, but even in circumstances where if it's a weekend or I've got the next day off or it's a holiday and I can stay up to watch the game, you end up going to bed almost immediately afterwards. So you never get to hear post-game comments, you never get to participate in the immediate after-game conversation about, who did well, who had a bad game, other people who are watching. And then when you read back through your Twitter timeline, because it's the only people really who care about this stupid game, it happened 6 hours ago, and you've got that disconnect, and it can feel a little alienating. Sort of related to that is the other thing that gets really frustrating, is there's a lot of common knowledge that you don't know. You have no idea. And I suppose maybe like non-traditional market fans might get this as well, if you're coming new to the sport. But there's a lot of, like, rivalries is a really good example, is iconic historical rivalries that are based on previous playoff series where they've gone up against each other, or geographical rivalries like, we hate this team because we come from this place and we hate all of them, or rivalries that grow up because of something specific. You don't hear about them, and because they're maybe not, like the Oilers at the moment don't really have a rivalry with anyone. Well, they do, but it's not it's not a big name one. It's not like Penguins and Flyers, because the Oilers are bad. But you only know about that history if it's something that you're aware of, or, you know, like player histories, like Bobby I've promptly forgotten every other possible example I can think of, but you're learning everything from scratch, and it can feel, nobody likes to be on the outside of a joke, and that's sometimes what it feels like, which can make it's the same with anything, trying to get into anything when you don't know the history is really difficult. And it's not like a TV show where you can just go back and rewatch. There's, 90 years of history there that you just can't know until you know. And you sort of have to have the guts to sort of be like, excuse me, I don't know what that thing is, can you explain? Thankfully, I've had a really nice group of friends who got me into hockey and who've sort of held my hand and introduced me to everything, but that can be difficult if you're not confident enough to do that. The other most restricting bit of being an international fan is the cost, because like hockey's expensive to play. Not that there's much opportunity to play here unless you happen to be like friends with somebody who owns a hockey team. It's difficult to get involved with, especially if you're not good and are lucky enough to be exposed to it at an early age, which I wasn't. Not that I have the personality that would have been conducive to competitive sports. Anyway, that's besides the point. Literally everything costs money, unless you're willing to be illegal and find like dodgy streams, which do exist. There is no way of watching them with a normal cable package. You either have to subscribe to Game Centre, where games might be blacked out for you because one of the UK channels, usually Premier Sport, are carrying it, but you might not get Premier Sport because you have to like subscribe to it. It's a £10 a month subscription thing, and that's annoying when you're already paying. And there's literally no way of you to see it because it's not being shown on TV. The places that are being broadcast, that are broadcasting NHL games in the UK, they only carry a few games. There's only one channel that does them, so there's only ever one. They can only show one game live, and sometimes it's the game you want and sometimes it's not. If you're a fan of a non-traditional market, so if you're trying to watch Columbus or the Yotes or Florida, or even like traditional markets like the Oilers, who just aren't very good and don't generate massive international interest, you've got no chance. Sometimes they'll show them like not live, like a catch up at like 5 o'clock when the channel comes on air, but you can do that. You want them live, really, because again, it's that sense of disconnect. Everything's already happened and you're not aware of it. But the other thing that makes being an international hockey fan really expensive is shipping costs. Sports merchandise, particularly hockey, is expensive anyway. But when you're then factoring in the shipping costs and the customs and everything else, it gets ridiculous. Which is very frustrating when you want to show that you're a fan of this thing and that it's really great and you love it, but you can't because you literally can't afford it. And the NHL has an international shop online that is slightly less expensive, and there are UK retailers that carry NHL merchandise, but the range is severely limited. As a Hawks fan, it's not too bad, because they're the Hawks. They have a fairly large international following. They have, because they're really good, they're quite iconic, their media is brilliant. They know what they're talking about and how to generate support and how to make that as widely available as possible. But if you're a fan of Columbus or the Arizona Coyotes or Florida, or which I am, because non-traditional markets, and also they're cute. It is really difficult because they're just not available. There isn't a market for them. So, you know, the last time I checked, there was 3 pieces of Coyote merchandise. There was a cap with the, like, Halo logo. There was a generic shirt with the Halo logo, and I think there was a sweatshirt, and that was it. There was no player number, like jerseys or sharesies or shirts available. There was nothing like that, which I can sort of see, but also it's frustrating when you are a fan of those things that it's so difficult to get hold of, on just even more so. And which sort of drives fans into doing, like, I have a Jonathan Taves jersey. I think it's real, I think it's authentic, I'm not sure, I don't really care, and nobody here notices. But it's an extra large, which means it's massive, and I don't wear it outside of the house. I can literally wear it like a dress. It comes down to nearly my knees. It was secondhand through eBay. It cost me £40. I don't know how to convert that to dollars, but £40. And yeah, for a long time that was the only hockey merch I owned, and I bought it because I wanted something to wear for games, and my parents thought I was crazy for spending like £40 on a jersey for this thing they'd never heard of, and I'm fairly sure they thought I would just sort of grow out of. The next thing I found was a Chicago shirt that some randomer in like Wales was selling, which cost me £12. And then I brought this one from Saban jersey, well, it's not a jersey, Saban shirt, that I bought from one of the UK retailers of NHL merchandise, as a, yay, exams are finished, treat to myself. And I also have a Coyotes shirt similar to this one that I bought again off eBay. Somebody was selling it, it was secondhand, and a Columbus Blue Jackets one, also from eBay, which it's a little frustrating because you get them cheaper, and it's the only way I can afford to wear NHL merchandise. But the NHL only pays attention, like any corporation, if they think there's money in what they're doing. And buying secondhand or from like eBay, or they don't know there's interest, and so it remains really difficult to get hold of things. In the same way that, to a lesser extent, it's difficult to find broadcast games and merchandise and stores and stuff in non-traditional markets, because the NHL just doesn't think it's profitable. And then the last thing that kind of sucks about being a hockey player, about being an international hockey fan, and that's sort of a relation related to a lot of things I've already mentioned, is that it's kind of lonely, because you invest so much time and so much effort and so much emotion in following these teams and being a fan of these people and responding to them. And it takes time, because, you know, you can't just turn on the news and the BBC Sports section will features ice hockey when the Olympics are on, and even then it's this country won gold, this country won silver, this country won bronze, and the winning goal was scored by Sidney Crosby. Because, and so you can't just turn the TV on and know what the league scores were. You have to actively go and find them. You have to check either the NHL site, or you have to go to your team's Twitter account, or, you know, I hope somebody you know has told you. And it's not too bad if you're just following one team. Twitter has, or had, and they haven't discontinued it, you could subscribe to text alerts whenever an account tweeted, which means I get all of the Blackhawks tweets sent to my phone via text, so that when I wake up every morning, I check my inbox and the scores are all there, who scored them, if anyone was injured, what the penalties were like, some after game quotes from like Q and various players. But it's hard to just keep up with the league as a whole, as to know what's happening across the board, which is frustrating when you are genuinely invested in hockey as a whole, and you miss out on interesting storylines and developments and teams that you really want to know about. It's just time consuming to keep up with, and you just don't have anyone to talk to. Games are on really late, so on the occasion you do find fellow hockey fans in your area, you can't really watch with them, because you know, the football's on a Saturday afternoon and evening, and it's easy to organise to meet together. But because NHL games sometimes don't start until, or often don't start until 2 a.m, that's not just something you can casually do. It has to be organised and at a weekend, and you have to have organised, like, to have them sleep over or a way of them getting home, and it's just difficult. You lack that sense of camaraderie, of sharing it. And there's just the fact that there aren't many hockey fans. Well, there are quite a lot, because otherwise we couldn't support a local league, which there is leagues in Britain. They're not brilliant, well, they're not up to NHL standards, but they're still really fun and they're still really valid, and it becomes really disheartening when you're listening to not players, or media or hockey fans from North America or anywhere else who are disparaging your sport that you care about equally as much. And these guys that sacrifice so much to play hockey, because they have to pay for their own equipment, they have to pay for their own travel a lot of the time. You know, the practice for my local team, the Telford Tigers, is on at 11 o'clock at night, because the ice rink prioritises things that are more profitable, like public skates and ice skating lessons, and it's the only time the ice is free, and they get to pay less for it because no one else wants the ice at 11 o'clock at night. So it's just, it gets lonely and it gets isolating, and none of your friends know what you're talking about when you come in either really excited because, you know, your favourite player scored a hat-trick, or when the Hawks won the cup, it was so I was so ecstatic and so excited, and nobody else around me cared. Or equally, when something really terrible happens, when one of your favourite players goes down injured, or, you know, when there's a concussion, or when your team gets knocked out of the playoffs, it becomes, you know, you have all these things and you want to share them with people and you want to be excited, but nobody in your immediate vicinity cares or knows about it, even casually. They just have no idea what you're talking about. And that gets a bit lonely sometimes. But that said, it's not all bad. It's definitely not all bad. Being a hockey fan is some of the best and most exciting and most fulfilling, one of the most fulfilling things I've done in the last 3 years. It's introduced me to so many new people, so many new friends, pushed me to do so many new things I wouldn't have before. And so next video will be the pros of being an international hockey fan and the ways that this game is amazing wherever you come from. See you next time!